In the coming weeks and months, you will be seeing new faces, new superstars, new matchups. As of now, you are the authority.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and I do have a dirty little secret. Might not really be a dirty little secret. I do like comic books, but I also like professional wrestling. I've been a professional wrestling fan my entire life. I do not like sports entertainment, but I do like professional wrestling. And I know another comic fan that has seen some of the parallels between comic fandom and wrestling fandom. And we're going to talk about the weird, eerie similarities between being a comic fan and a wrestling fan. And with me today is Yule Carter. What's up, buddy?
I have noticed that wrestling and comic books feels very similar at times, and I'm really happy to be talking about it finally with an audience, not just my girlfriend hearing me crap on it.
Yeah, but my wife's in the same boat. The first thing that is just quite apparent in today's wrestling market and comic book market is Vince McMahon, in the WWE, they don't like their fans. They want new fans that are better. Comic books really don't like their fans and readers. They want new readers. And it always feels like if you're a hardcore wrestling fan or if you're a hardcore comic fan, you're just being shit on 24/7 and no one really appreciates you.
I like it in Marvel. It's so funny how Marvel especially feels like the WWE. Vince McMahon and who runs Marvel? They're both Trump buddies.
CB
right?
Cebulski.
Oh, well, I was thinking like even bigger in the company, right? And they, for some reason, seem to not. And then CB Cebulski too. He's always talking about food. Vince McMahon's always trying to get sports XFL going, bodybuilding, anything that isn't wrestling, and that's what makes them their money. What makes Marvel big and important is their comic books. And if you stick with wrestling and if you stick with comic books, like you said, you're gonna get shit on.
Yeah,
sorry.
Eventually you're just gonna find out that they wish if they could, they would drop you as a fan or a reader or a customer at a moment's notice if they could get the right audience. Of course, with comic books, it'd be younger fans that are maybe more open-minded to progressive ideologies. And wrestling, it just seems like they just want not rednecks. Like that's one of the weird things. Yeah. There's also as a comic fan or a wrestling fan, you're hammered down as you're very much stereotyped. Wrestling fans are all rednecks. Comic fans are just a bunch of nerds.
Right. I mean, nerd has become a cooler thing these days, but when you are from the outside and you start seeing who made up the original base of comic book fans, it can be a little scary at times. I'm there. I always thought I was the beautiful one of them, of the ugly ducklings, and then wrestling fans, you think they're all toothless.
Yeah.
But there's been an influx of kind of like a hipster kind of person that is into wrestling. And those are the ones that are from the outside that are kind of being courted in right now. But when they finally get that taste of Vince McMahon and wrestling as an organization just doesn't really care about you anymore, where are they going to be? Who's going to be left standing is really what my question is.
Yeah, in both, wrestling and comic books, of course, they have a proud history of really dumping on the people that really made the organizations. Like Vince McMahon and the WWE will cut ties with you and say bad stuff with you at a moment's notice. Of course, comic books, it doesn't matter if you created Batman, doesn't matter if you created Superman, doesn't matter if you were key in the creation of Spider-Man. As soon as you are no longer of value to them, or maybe they think that maybe you start to just bother them, they will drop you and basically give you no credit for the rest of your life.
Yeah, they actively didn't want to give Jack Kirby any creative or artwork back and all sorts of stuff, for his characters. And that was like, Stan Lee was there hanging out, in charge still. Vince McMahon, he'll be like, I heard, all right, so this is just the other day, he fired a woman, Sarah Logan. He has a 90-day no-compete clause during this time. he could have waived that and it wouldn't have mattered because there's no one she can go to right now in this, current climate.
Nobody can do wrestling right now.
Right, exactly. And so they actually wanted her to come back for a day. And they're like, well, you're still under contract. I felt like a Jack Kirby a little bit, Yeah, he doesn't care about his performers hardly.
Of course, they're not employees at the WWE, just like they're not at Marvel or DC. They're private contractors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
so they don't have to give them benefits and stuff.
There's a Vice documentary that talks about the dark wrestling stories, but the darkest wrestling story is the way they're contractors. They're not given health care. These are the people that are doing bumps in the ring. And
and they work like 300 days a year.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And in Marvel, it's the same way. You hear all the time about some old ass artist or writer that's down on their luck. I mean, William Messner Loebs doesn't have legs and is living in a car or something like that. How can you not take care of these people that frickin' these were old people now actually cared about the comic books they were working on and probably didn't care about royalties so much. And, Jim Starlin is a guy that has a gripe, but then there's all the other people that, worked with Thanos in the meantime. They shepherded these characters. They kept Batman going so that Tom King could do what he did to it, Mm-hmm. And it's sad. It's really sad to see these creators have such a hard time and not being taken care of afterwards when what they did made Batman what it is today.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's other weird similarities. Like this is one I see. You might be mad at me about this one, but when you think of the WWE and the heyday, there's been several up periods. Of course, when Bruno Sammartino was selling out Madison Square Garden for 8 years during his title run, there was definitely an up period. Hulkamania, who can forget about that one? Rock and Wrestling. There, you could have WWF on MTV or something. But really, their most successful period was somewhat recently. It was called the Attitude Era. It was Stone Cold Steve Austin. You had, The Rock at the time. Of course, he's Dwayne Johnson, the most popular action hero in the world now. As far as movies, the rise of Mankind kind of became a world champion at that time. The Undertaker was big. You had all these huge stars in wrestling. Of course, Triple H. He came to power at that time. People think about the Attitude Era, about how amazing it was. And it was when you're watching Stone Cold or The Rock and stuff like that. But all the other stuff around it was awful. Like all the bra and panties matches. Although I will say this, tag team wrestling was never been better than it was in the Attitude Era. Because, the Hardys, the Dudley Boys, Edge and Christian had a lot of good stuff. But there's a lot of trash all around it. Of course, a lot of had to do with Vince Russo. But then when you think about comics, lots of ups and downs. But a lot of people point to the 90s. Yes, There's some great stuff in the 90s, but there is some trash that was all surrounded in the 90s too. Everyone talks about the 90s like everything was great. No. The stuff that was really good was great, but there was a lot of bad stuff there too.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of bad stuff. And stuff that you might be embarrassed about. I mean, if you like comic books, it wasn't cool yet, really. And it's something you have to, again, it's a dirty secret you're going to let somebody in on. It's one thing to wear a Spider-Man shirt. Everybody knows Spider-Man. You're going to run around with an Alpha Flight shirt on. What a dork. And, kind of the same thing with wrestling. Everybody knew Hulk Hogan. He's kind of fun and everything. He hung out with Mr. T. It's the frame of nostalgia that makes you think everything was great. I personally am not, and in this, talk about hating me. Sorry, guys. I don't like The Undertaker and never have. In comics, he might be for you. If you were like me and you don't like The Undertaker, maybe you don't like Rob Liefeld in comic books. You kind of, he got really big and he's super powerful in comics, but I'm not really a big fan. I'm not actually saying that for myself. I personally am a Rob Liefeld fan, but that's just for other reasons. But I'm just trying to give you a little connection, how you cannot like something that was very big during that time. And it doesn't mean you have to like it. You can acknowledge that it was big, but a lot of times that's just, like I said, nostalgia.
for every Stone Cold Vince McMahon feud that was amazing, and it was everything was fire. Every time Stone Cold was going to stun him or kick his ass, I was on board. It was amazing, but you'd still get the Ministry of Darkness, basically crucifying Stone Cold on television. It was a terrible visual. You have Kane. Didn't he hook up like a battery to good old JR's balls and electrocute him live on television?
Did he do that to him? He might have done that to him also. I thought he did Shane McMahon that way, though.
It was Shane. He actually set JR on fire during an interview. That's what he did to JR. You'd always have stuff like that, that's really embarrassing. Like if you were dating a girl at the time and she walked in and saw it, you'd be like, oh man, I don't know how I'm going to talk myself out of this one.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, in the 90s especially, they had there was a lot of boobs and butts on the covers of comics. And thankfully there's adult comics. And I'm not, talking to, smut. I'm just saying, Sin City is out there and whatnot during that time. So there are good things that you could show people if you like them. But yeah, the boobs and butts and dudes that look like wrestlers. Again, I mean, the physiques. It was so Attitude Era in comics back in the 90s.
Yeah, I remember, all the bra and panties matches. Of course, when you're like 20 years old, it seems pretty cool. Looking back on it, it's all in very poor taste. Val Venus, the porn star wrestler, the way he would start a feud was he would go and bang your girlfriend and like put it on the big screen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, they were popular. They could do no wrong. Comics were popular. They were on QVC and stuff like that. They could do no wrong. This is going to put your kid through college. And you know what? I was a college kid, and I remember kids during that time doing the DX chop to me, and I would respond back, Yeah. I was never closer to little kids than I was then, as my mentality is concerned. Reading comics, watching wrestling.
So in the moment, it sort of, it felt really funny. I had WWE Network there for a while, and I was going back and watching some old Raws. And like I said, when it was good, it was amazing. But there's a lot of crap around it, just kind of like the 90s comics. And, even today, a lot of people are above comics now. They've outgrown it. Now I've moved on to manga. Manga is where it's at. And, there's a lot of wrestling. WWE lost the integrity of the sport. I'm into New Japan Pro Wrestling now. That's where it's real.
When you feel that you have been disrespected as a fan, or if you aren't being served like you originally, maybe you outgrew something also. Eventually you do have to move on from high school and so on and so forth. Maybe the WWE is that high school. If you're older now and you go back to it, maybe it's more like a reunion. So you move on to Japan or other organizations because they might be actually giving you what you need to continue to be a fan. So they take wrestling a lot more seriously there. They take their storylines a lot more seriously. Just like you'll hear people say about manga, the storytelling's better. There's less politics in there. It's much more about character growth and arcs, where it differs from U.S. based comics. It takes it seriously. I mean, not always, all the time, but I kind of like in New Japan or other, like Ring of Honor, maybe, to like when Vertigo started up. You could still have your Superman with a mullet, but now we have like Vertigo comics or maybe Dark Horse comics. They weren't always just like, Aliens and Predator. They would have, cool stuff that weren't just IPs. There's a lot of comic book companies that are offering what Marvel and DC aren't supplying. So that's cool too.
Yeah, just like wrestling, you got your AEW, you got PWG, you got Ring of Honor, you got MLW down there in Florida. There's more wrestling available now, even on television, but live available now than there's ever been. Just like there's more comic publishers right now with a wider variety of comics, in North America to compete with Marvel, DC, or in the case of wrestling, competing with your WWE because there's no WCW, hasn't been for 20 years now. But it gives you more choice.
So if we're talking about the performers and the comic book creators not getting paid a very good living, if the industry is successful, you would hope that, you know, you could ply your trade and go to another company and be able to use those against each other so that you can make a few more bucks. And you are seeing that with AEW. People usually go to DC to make some money. They go to Image so they can own their own rights. People go on the independents so that they can own their own rights. When I think AJ Styles was released and he wasn't picked up by WWE, he went and he did the Japan circuit and Ring of Honor, and he had to learn a new skill. But what he did was he found out I could make some money out here on my own. And there have been other performers like that, like the Bucks, the Young Bucks, if you will. Kenny Omega was a star in Japan, and you know he's coming over here and to great success. Now they're on a more elevated platform, and you see that with comic book people also. Maybe it's the person that did an independent comic that was only local to your store, and now they're doing a mainstream comic, or maybe they've been invited to go do that over at Image. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can get in comics and in wrestling and thoroughly be satisfied still.
Yeah, and then you kind of think about, you know, when you're at Marvel or DC, there's kind of a governor on you. You got you have to work with a certain set of characters. They're going to want you to do certain storylines. You're not really going to be able to do what you want to do. So maybe a guy like Ed Brubaker, fantastic Captain America writer, he feels better on the independents. He does not want to go back to Marvel. He's glad, you know, I think he's the only guy with an exclusive contract, he and Sean Phillips with Image Comics, because they can do their criminal book, you know, and the fade out and all that kind of stuff. And then you kind of look at wrestling, you got your Jon Moxley. Yeah, he was in a match with Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. He felt, you know, constricted creatively. He did not like the way that, you know, WWE treated him. They thought he felt like they turned him into a joke character, which was completely opposite of who he was, you know, and the character he wanted to portray. So he said, there isn't enough money in the world that you can pay me to stay here. He left, he goes to AEW, and now he gets to do his own thing because he has creative freedom. And, you know, he's much happier there. Is he making the same amount of money? Probably not. But now he gets to do what he wants to do. But because there's that competitive there, he is still making good money.
Yeah, and since AEW is they're not really competing against WWE, but they exist in the same universe. They will take talent and able to offer them less money. They give them a chance to go and work other areas also. So Jon Moxley has done New Japan quite successfully over there also. So that can supplement their income. And again, you know, all of the T-shirts that they're selling for themselves are their money.
Yeah, and they can go to ProWrestlingTees.com. They can have exclusive stuff that is absolutely theirs and not AEW related.
Yeah,
of course, you can't do that if you're a WWE, you know, talent.
Yeah, and I kind of think that, like, maybe for comic books, that would be like a crowdfunding situation also.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or a lot of artists have like Patreon accounts and stuff like that, where you get like pages of artwork, digital and stuff like that. And, you know, so you're like, you know, there's ways if there's a way to hustle for a comic book creator too. You just have to know how to do it. And the thing that's weird is that, kind of like wrestling, if you don't know that these guys are going to other companies and only know WWE, you might not know that these people that aren't working at Marvel are actually doing something. So broaden your horizons. They're out there. They're still working.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, the weird similarities. I'll tell you, if you go and you follow somebody like Brandon Stroud, I know he writes wrestling stuff for Up Rocks or something that's wrestling related, and you just don't think about their tweets being related to wrestling, you will think that they're about the comic book industry because the parallels are so clear. There have been a few times where I've actually taken a tweet from a wrestling guy, you know, taken his name off of it and just like screen posted it. I didn't, you know, take the contents and just put it on there. And people are like, oh yeah, that's exactly how I feel. It's like, the guy wasn't even talking about comics, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, that's, comic books gets a lot of outrage on social media for various reasons. I mean, it's so many. And wrestling, especially when we're talking about Vince McMahon, gets a lot of social media outrage also. But it can be a little out of hand also.
Well, it's because both fan bases are extremely passionate. It's probably why I feel right at home in both of them. And people, they want what they want. And if they're not getting it, they're very vocal about what you're doing wrong.
Well, see, the one difference is comic books, you just won't buy something. But if you're in an audience, you can really let Vince know what you think at a wrestling show.
Absolutely.
There's been many a time where that's happened.
The last one I wanted to talk about, this kind of falls in line with this. I remember when I think it was Brock Lesnar or it was Roman Reigns had won the title, and they were chanting AEW as the WWE event went off the air. And we got to talk about Roman Reigns. So I got the perfect, he's basically a wrestling character. He's The Rock's cousin. He's basically been forced on the audience. Vince McMahon and the overlords at WWE earmarked him and said, he's our next big star. And it doesn't matter what the people think or whether or not they've accepted him or if they believe that he's as powerful as we say he is. He's the best wrestler. And he's basically the equivalent of Captain Marvel. Because Marvel be damned, they do not care if people believe that she is the world's mightiest hero, Marvel Universe's mightiest hero. You are going to get Captain Marvel. You're going to accept Captain Marvel. Even if you don't, we're going to ignore it and act like she's that thing anyway. So I think Roman Reigns and Captain Marvel are basically the same person.
I cannot even think of another Marvel character to put in Captain Marvel's spot. I agree 100%. Roman Reigns, I was definitely one of the haters when the Shield came out and it was Ambrose, Rollins, and Reigns. We all knew Reigns was there because he was the greenest and he needed those other two to be there. And ever since, he's just been forced down our throat. And there's been times when it's been a little bit okay. It's usually when the D push him. Boy, it's sad to say this. He's a mid-card show match. If he was always in the mid-card, I would never have a problem with him. But he was, again, forced down our throat. And Captain Marvel, forced down our throat. And in movies, too. I mean, how many different volumes has she had? A new #1, a mini-series
like
that changes
13.
her origin.
13 or something like that.
It's ridiculous.
You know what's crazy with Roman Reigns is they actually had the perfect time. They had him in the Royal Rumble. They had him in the final 3. The entire crowd was chanting his name, wanting him to be champion. And I believe it was Dave Bautista tossed him over and won it. And the whole place booed him out of the fucking building.
Yeah.
They wanted Roman Reigns, and they finally did it the next year, and no one wanted him that year.
Yeah, Batista was much hated during that time. They had a good I'm from Hollywood, I can't stand you people story, and they didn't understand what they needed to do.
I just remember Blue Tista because he would always come out in the blue gear. Everyone else in his group would come out with like matching outfits, but he was Triple H and Randy Orton. They matched, and then it was Blue Tista.
Yeah, WWE and comic books, wrestling usually and comic books have a problem sticking landings on big events.
Mm-hmm.
They don't always do it. You know, like, did you ever read Secret Invasion? Like the first 6 of 7 issues were great, and then the last one was like a real piece of S.
Well, there's also the weird thing with events where the last issue actually isn't the conclusion of the event, but it's actually the segue to the next event. So a lot of times at the end of a wrestling event, it's the pay-per-views is supposed to be the finish, and then you start with the next storyline. But a lot of it'll be whatever, and then the guy runs out and like hits him with a chair, and you're like, oh, I guess he's the next guy.
Yeah, why do we bother? Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. Yeah, there's just so many similarities to these ridiculous industries. But it's funny, like when I bitch about them the most, it's Vince McMahon and Marvel.
I was the same way.
Yeah. I mean, it's what you like. And, you're in it and you feel like you have some ownership, at least vested interest, and you want to let people know. All
right, we're up against the clock. We talk about wrestling and the weird parallels between wrestling and comics. We're both big wrestling fans, big comic fans, and this is a lot of fun. Actually, hopefully people watch this.
If you like wrestling, let us know who your favorite wrestlers are in the comments down below. I'd be interested to see.
And definitely let us know who their comic book equivalent is.
Oh,
if your favorite wrestler is Chris Jericho, let us know who you think the equivalent Marvel character or DC character is to go with him.
Yeah, I like that.
That'll
who should they play in the movie?
Yeah, I was just saying that Roman Reigns should play the next Terminator.
Yeah.
He's robotic and he's huge.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. We'll see you later.
Peace out.